Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
This is the Little Tramp Freighter podcast, cruising across the galaxy far, far away. Aggressive Negotiations. I am one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and with me on this fine journey as we continue to find ways to just burrow through hyperspace and find corners of the galaxy never before explored is my dear friend, Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, what pieces of wisdom do you bring to us from the lightsaber manual that you just released through Coruscant Galactic Press?
Don't point an unlit lightsaber at your eyeball.
That is important safety.
You'll put your eye out.
That is such important safety guidance. I think everybody needs to listen to this. Get out there to your local bookstore on Coruscant and buy that book right now. And also, while you're out there, go to Apple Podcasts. Give us a star rating and review. Please reach out to us over on social media at The Jedi Masters on Twitter. You can find the network, The Nerd Party, over on Twitter at Join Nerd Party, and as The Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. And so we come here to another one of my trademark surprise topics for Matt, because heaven forbid I give him a chance to think his thoughts through. I always love to just leave you on your heels, but it's always a fun exercise because we know I don't think about things either, even when I have the thought. I just happen to write it down, so why not? Okay, so here's what happens, and I'll take you through the way my brain works. Is somebody sent something to me, and I was looking for a GIF of laughing, and so I chose Grievous climbing into the escape pod, steepling his fingers, laughing, ha 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 ha. And this triggers a thought to me. I need to know from you, Grievous, yes or no, did or didn't know that Palpatine and Sidious were one and the same. Therefore, did or didn't realize that he was about to accidentally end the war by killing Palpatine / Sidious, and or if he did know, was he behaving on Dooku's behalf, but does that contradict him then just rushing out and kneeling before Sidious? And then again, would Grievous have been able to run the show if he had managed to accidentally kill the guy that's giving him orders? I know that's a lot of questions in one, but
it's a lot of questions in one. So let's tackle the first one. I do not think, it's my opinion, that Grievous did not know that Sidious and Palpatine were the same person.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense that they wouldn't know that, and that he wouldn't know that because he wouldn't have done what he did, because he truly is, trying to take the Supreme Chancellor at that point. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no indication in the film that I can see that Grievous is doing anything but trying to escape with the Chancellor. And has no indication that this is a ruse.
Yeah, I agree. It is the only thing that really makes sense. And I know I had those other questions stacked up on top of that, but yeah, we agree. Grievous had no idea. I think they've left us enough clues too that Grievous didn't really know what was going on. And although, of course, with Star Wars, there's always the possibility that they could rewrite it in a heartbeat, and we'd be like, oh, okay, that makes sense too. But given Grievous doesn't know, was Grievous's presence on the battle bridge really so significant that Dooku would not have used him in the battle when Obi-Wan and Anakin show up? Or do you think that Dooku, in addition to his arrogance, thinking he can beat Anakin and Obi-Wan, knew that Grievous was not going to be down with the plan to let one of them live? Because obviously the plan is to let Anakin live. And so that was... would that have been too much of a risk factor to have Grievous there with Dooku?
That's one of those things where, when I think of the inner workings of those scenes, that it's Palpatine who's basically given Dooku the plan. And Palpatine believes that Dooku can take out Obi-Wan, but he's not going to be able to take out Anakin. You know, it's obviously, I think, more a part of the plan for Palpatine to have Anakin take out Dooku for him and get him to that point. And the last thing that he wants is Grievous there, you know, messing things up. And so I think what he does is he has Dooku create this whole scenario for Grievous to pump Grievous up and say, oh, we need you on the bridge, making sure the battle is going, blah, 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 you know, all that stuff. And because this plan doesn't have anything to do with Grievous at that point, you know, Grievous has basically served his purpose. And I think obviously that's also what we kind of see throughout the film is that, you know, Sidious doesn't care about Grievous anymore. You know, he sends him away to Utapau and sets him up basically to be taken down by somebody, hopefully. But, you know, Grievous has always just been a tool. And I think that's in many ways what makes Grievous almost kind of heartbreaking is that he's been this character who's just, he's given everything to this cause to be the greatest version of himself, and yet he's really only ever been a tool of somebody else. And so everything that he's thought he's done has meant nothing.
Yeah. I'd counter that by saying that he's also, and even if you don't weigh in the series, The Clone Wars, he's also obviously a maniac. So it's hard for me. I if anything, and this is the weird part, I feel more sympathy for Dooku than I do for Grievous. Grievous seems like just a bastard that was given an enhanced life, whereas Dooku's emotions were played. You know, Grievous was always going to be a murderous thug, regardless of whose side he was on. Dooku could have been something more. Dooku could have been something better, but he wasn't. And that, if anything, is more sympathetic to me. More, he gets more empathy.
That makes
from
sense.
Me. But given that Grievous is, I mean, we've talked about it. What if Palpatine died and those sorts of things? I mean, Grievous as a tool, though, right? Where do we wind up? Let's say everything goes according to Palpatine's plan. Obi-Wan is dead. Dooku is assassinated. And Anakin has taken his first step toward, well, second step, third step, 15th step, whatever. He's taken another step, a significant step toward the dark side. Grievous's usefulness is done at that point. Does he have Anakin kill Grievous on the way out if Obi-Wan is not there to slow them down? Or, you know, but like that's the thing is like, at what point does Grievous get wiped out if everything goes according to Sidious's plan here? Does Grievous ever make it off that ship?
You know, that's an interesting question. You know, I think of the novelization where there's the whole scene where Obi-Wan is being sent to take down Grievous, and Mace Windu talks about that what makes Obi-Wan the perfect person to send is, you know, his fighting style and the type of person that he is, to which makes him a good candidate to bring this type of character down. And in many ways, you know, Obi-Wan is the antithesis to Anakin.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that creates a really interesting question in my mind. And obviously I know the novelization and those things that aren't in the film aren't canon, but when I take that into consideration, I don't know. You know, would Anakin be able to defeat Grievous in the same way that we see Obi-Wan being able to do? And I think that in the end, Anakin probably could do it. Would it be as successful as Obi-Wan's ability to do it? I don't know. And partially, again, I'm just taking what Mace Windu says in the novelization as kind of my precursor for having this question and even debating on whether or not that's the case. They are very different people, and so, but and part of that it's because of Anakin's recklessness and his pretense for being very impulsive, which it sometimes is good and sometimes also gets him into some serious trouble.
Yeah.
And when fighting somebody like Grievous, I think that you need to be on the other side, less impulsive and more kind of very methodical and defense-minded, the way that Obi-Wan is. And, so all of those things, I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question, and maybe I'm just really overthinking it, but I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I don't think so, because I think that if things go according to the primary way Palpatine wants to see it play out, I think that Palpatine probably uses that moment to reveal himself to Anakin and sizzle Grievous a bit and say, okay, my boy, you're on board. Let me break everything down for you. Mm-hmm. And that's why, he's so desperate to have Anakin leave Obi-Wan behind. Leave him, we'll never make it. And, and Anakin refusing to leave Obi-Wan behind is the proof that Obi-Wan has to be dealt with in some other way. And that's where I go with it. I think that Sidious gets emboldened if things break a little bit differently. But I also think in terms of the fact that Grievous, in this one little question that sprang to mind about knowing, not knowing what his actions would cause and who was actually there, that sort of thing, it shows how the dysfunction of siloed communication, and stay with me here, this is going to sound really weird, but I was actually thinking about it in terms of working a job or anything that you see in a larger organization or bureaucracy or anything like that, is that desire to keep things siloed, because knowledge is power, right? That's Sidious may be able to shoot lightning out of his hands, but knowledge is the real power. He can control each piece, Dooku, Grievous, Anakin, the Jedi Council. He can control them discreetly so long as he never gives anybody enough information to be standing there one day, turn to the other person and say, hey, you know what he said? Oh, no, that's completely different from what I know. And have them mesh and have them figure it all out. And I guess that's a part and parcel of the Sith themselves, which is why they may be able to ascend but never hold power permanently, is because they refuse to be transparent. And so I think Grievous, if anything, is a real example of that lack of transparency and why it leads to just nothing but sorrow and misery and destruction and fighting. And then I springboard and I go to the fact that Padme is the one in the movie that says this war represents a failure to listen. Or does she say listen or communicate? The line's escaping me right now.
What we have here is a failure to communicate, but she says listen.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is she's speaking to that failure of anybody to share what they're thinking. Everything is about cloak and dagger stuff. The Jedi don't tell Anakin. Anakin doesn't tell the Jedi. Anakin doesn't tell Obi-Wan. Padme's the only, and the whole mess with Grievous and Sidious and Dooku and the galaxy is because everybody is controlling knowledge. And not just knowledge, but their real feelings about things. And it's really disconcerting because you see, again, a lesson that Lucas is trying to teach his audience about when you're not honest about how you feel about something is when the conflict happens. And it's much better if you're upfront so everybody can know where everybody stands. And you don't need to be friends and you don't need to agree. You can just sort of say, okay, I feel this way, you feel that way. Great. I'll be in my corner. You'll be in your corner. That sort of thing.
It's really interesting you bring that up because I was just, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about the way in which, that episode of the Clone Wars plays out. I think it's A Friend in Need. Maybe not that one. It's the one where Ahsoka goes with Padme to Raxus and they meet with Mia Bonteri and Lux.
Right.
And she talks about this idea that the only separatists she's met are like Dooku and battle droids and Nemoidians. And it's this whole idea of like siloing, like you said, people, whole groups into these labeled silos, to which then we judge based off of as if that's who they are. And when she meets Lux Monteri and his mother, she finds them to be quite reasonable and people that are not all that different than her and Padme and Anakin and all the people that she grew up with. And what is different there is just this worry about what the Republic is becoming at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where those separatists were. Aside from Dooku, the rest of the separatists were basically worried about what is happening to the Republic, to which it's becoming this thing that is slowly eroding away our powers, that's caring less and less about the people and only about these corporations, which is caring only about the super rich and not just everyone under its care, like all of these type of questions. And so I think that idea is something that is very fascinating because it makes for a great question as to like you said, the Sith put themselves into a box by siloing information, and that communication in the end is the key, whether that's between people. We see that play out in the small sense between Anakin and Padme, and what helps corrupt their relationship is the inability to have honest communication with one another, all the way to the macro level between governments, and so I think that's really a brilliant thought, honestly.
Well, and I think that there's Padme is speaking to, when she's talking about failure to listen, part and parcel of that is willing to accept that not everybody's going to agree. And that goes back to the discussion in episode 2. Well, then they should be made to agree. Mm-hmm. Well, who's going to do it? You? No, someone wise.
Right.
And that whole idea that my moral superiority makes me correct, and therefore I will cede the power and stop listening, and they'll force you to do what I think is right. And it's like, that's so fundamentally interesting about what Lucas did with the prequels. And again, only an environment, only a galaxy, only a world where you have these silos of information and power being bandied about can somebody like Grievous even succeed or exist. Grievous, Windu actually says, General Grievous is a coward. And he is. He always runs and hides. He doesn't want to confront anybody. He will only fight when he thinks the deck is so stacked in his favor that there's no way he can lose. And that is, Grievous winds up becoming that symbol of the people who, his entire power is from the people who have no interest in listening.
Well, and not just that, but he also becomes the avatar of the people to which always will end up blaming somebody else for their own downfall. Grievous becomes that character to which always somebody else is always responsible for their failures.
Yeah.
And it's never his fault or his thought process or his ideology or anything like that led to his downfall. It's it's somebody else's fault.
Yes, and when he gets boxed in with malevolence, he just turns off the comm channel and just runs as fast as he can.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I think one of the things that it also shows is just this inability to be self-reflective and to truly think about oneself and one's beliefs and the things to which we are pursuing, and that lack of critical thought, and beholden only to the basest of instincts, which is kind of what Grievous is that character who, what he wants is just to be in power, just to be in charge. Yeah. And there's nothing more insidious than that in what he wants. Because he's not willing to think about anything deeper.
Right.
And he's willing to sacrifice whatever it takes to get that. And what we see is in his character is one which he sacrifices everything and he gains nothing in the end.
Right.
Because what was he? He was just a tool of somebody else with a ideology that was way beyond his, right? With a power level that was way beyond his. And when you have nothing to live for other than power, there's always somebody more powerful, and I think that's one of the things to which, Grievous is a perfect representation of what George talks about in Star Wars, which life cannot just be about power. It has to be about something else. It has to be about something like right and wrong. Otherwise, it's basically meaningless because there's always going to be a bigger fish.
That's right. That's right. Well, who would have known that we would have taken a journey like this, talking about just selecting a GIF with General Grievous in it, right? But that's sort of the joy of aggressive negotiations. And one of the reasons I love having these conversations with you is I think you've thrown a lot of stuff for me to think about so that the next time I watch Revenge of the Sith, which is and will always be the best Star Wars film that was ever created, it's something else to noodle over. But if people want to, trade some insights about where they see Grievous and what he might represent, where can they find you online?
Well, sure. I'd love to talk to you, and you can find me all over social media and the different platforms under the name Matt Rushing 02. So just search there, and you most likely are going to find me. You can also find me here on the network. I completed a show with Drea Kaufman called Owl Post. We talked about the Harry Potter series one chapter at a time, and it's a lot of fun. So I hope you will check that out. You can also find me over on the TFM network. I've done and I do a lot of shows over there. You can find me on one side of the network. It's called the 602 Club, where we talk about all of the fandoms we love. Not just one, but we talk, lots of Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Bond, Lord of the Rings. I mean, it's endless. So you can check that out. And of course, in that same feed, you can find some bonus shows that John Mills and I have done. We did Snyder Cuts, and we're also doing Assembling Avengers. So that entire feed is just chock full of goodness for you. I'm also doing over there Literary Treks, The Orb, and Warp 5. Literary Treks is about the books and the comics of Star Trek. Warp 5 is about a Star Trek Enterprise, and The Orb is about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But, John, if people want to catch up with you and maybe talk some Grievous or anything else Star Wars related, or maybe they're just wondering, what is John Mills thinking today? Where can they find you?
Oh, my gosh, please. Yeah, I spend enough time in my head, I can warn you against that. But look for Kessel Junkie online, KESSELJUNKIE. I have a lot of fun on Letterboxd. You can find me on your social network of choice. I poke around, I dart in and out. I'm a man of the modern age. I'm hip with the social medias the way the kids are. So, right here on the network, you can also find me co-hosting House Lights, which is a great series where we look at the work of directors, either from start to finish or other strange combinations. But I do want to point everybody over to Snyder Cuts and Assembling Avengers, which are flip sides of the same coin, and boy, it's proving to be a really interesting journey with those two things. So I do encourage everybody to go to the 602 Club feed and go check that out, because it is a lot of fun, especially if you have graced your ear holes with us here on Aggressive Negotiations. Conversations like this, but about the Zack Snyder's works and the Marvel movies, we think it's pretty magical over there. So, but given all of that, I have worked up quite a thirst. I want to get some Jawa juice, maybe some of those bantha fritters that they've been talking so much about, or even some fried tip yip. Who knows what that's made of? I don't. So, Master Rushing, I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are close.